Ladies and gentlemen, from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice, Deacon Gerald Celente.
Hello, this is Deacon Celente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice. Freedom, peace, and justice. Freedom to be who you want to be. Peace. Life on earth. Goodwill to all. Justice. Pay for your crimes and rewarded for your goodness. On the freedom level, it's been stolen. The politicians have taken it away from the people, forcing people to get vaccinated. An Operation Warp Speed gene therapy inoculation never injected into the human body before. And you go back to the 2020 elections in America, the current president and vice president, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, said they wouldn't take the vaccination during the campaign in 2020 because they blamed Trump for pushing this thing through and doing it for political reasons. And now they're the big pushers of the jab. Shows you the hypocrisy. A study came out on Wednesday in the Washington Post. So you can't call it misinformation because it came from the establishment media. Vaccinated people now make up a majority of COVID deaths in the United States. The first time since the beginning of the pandemic, and it's not a pandemic, it's the beginning of the lockdowns by politicians. But people are calling it a pandemic. I believe some 6.5 million people died around the world in 2.5 years. An estimated 7 million die every year for the last 20, 40 years, whatever, of air pollution. But they call it a pandemic. Majority of Americans are dying from COVID were at least partially vaccinated, according to a new analysis of federal and state data. The Washington Post analysis has found that more vaccinated people are now dying of the COVID disease, and 58% of the coronavirus deaths in August in the United States, quote, were people who were vaccinated or boosted. Yet, the comedians, so-called artists, all the politicians, all the people in the media, making fun of everybody that wouldn't get the vaccination and telling everybody to get one. And you lose your job if you don't get one. And of course, we provide religious vaccine exemptions. And if a company accepts religious vaccine exemptions, the vaccine exemption from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, Justice, freedompeacejustice.com, 99.9% of them have been accepted. The only ones that haven't been accepted have been rejected by hypocrites, because the data and facts are all in this vaccine exemption. And again, 99.9% have been accepted. For the first time since the beginning of the pandemic, again, they use the word pandemic, in early 2020, majority of Americans are dying from COVID were at least partially vaccinated, according to a new analysis by federal state data. Quote, in September 2021, vaccinated people made up just 23% of the coronavirus fatalities. Even at 23%, they call that only. And again, the people that are dying of the virus, the facts are there. Obesity, of which 42% of Americans are obese. Type 2 diabetics, respiratory ailments, pre-existing comorbidities. In January and February this year, it was up to 42%, the report noted. And again, let's go back. When they sold this as having a 95 and 96% efficacy rate, and all you would need is 2 jabs. Well, that's forgotten. Oh, it's a new variant. Quote, "We can no longer say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated," said Kaiser Family Foundation Vice President Cynthia Cox, who conducted the analysis on behalf of the Washington Post. Now, wait a minute. We can no longer say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They're blaming all the unvaccinated people for spreading the virus, when the fact is that the vaccinated people were spreading the virus. We reported on it as it was happening. They'd have those big Washington press club meetings, and you had to show your proof of vaccination. A load of people got the COVID. Over and over. One after another. It happened right in front of our eyes. People getting vaccinated and getting COVID. Then the report goes on to say, older people were always especially vulnerable. Oh, that's right. In Italy, when they started spreading the fear and hysteria, the first country to lock down to follow the Chinese way, the average age of the deaths were 81 years of age. In America, for men, 78 years is about how long you live on average. So as elderly people, again, people with pre-existing comorbidities, older people were always especially vulnerable and now make up a higher proportion of COVID fatalities than even before in the pandemic, reports Scientific American. Wait a minute. Why are they vaccinating young children and forcing this on them if it's older people? Quote, COVID deaths among people aged 65 and older more than doubled between April and July this year, rising by 125%, according to the Kaiser Family Report. Why are they forcing young people and children to get vaccinated? This is demonic. It's against the facts. It's against the figures. Again, overall, the World Health Organization reported 6.5 million deaths linked to the pandemic. 6.5 million out of 8 billion people. 8 billion. And again, some 7 million die every year from air pollution. And all the poisons they put in our food. You like those ultra-processed foods? Those artificial flavors and those artificial colors? How about those forever chemicals? Maybe GMOs and pesticides. They're killing us in so many different ways. And they destroy the lives and livelihoods of billions of people across the planet fighting the COVID war. And not a word, not a peep about natural healing, about building up your immune system, about God's nature way, natural healing. No, you're not allowed to speak about nature in the world today. Only drugs and drug dealers who sell them. How about building up your immune system? No, we won't talk about that at all. Then, on Tuesday, this person that plays the role of the coronavirus response coordinator for the Biden administration, Dr. Ashish Jha, said, quote, "Please don't wait. Get your COVID shot. Get your flu shot. That's why God gave you two arms." This is demonic. It's satanic. That's why God gave you two arms? You mean they found a skull, I think it was like 20 million years old or something. And then God said just about, 100, 200 years ago, 150 years ago, that you have to take shots in your arm? What God are you talking about? Not the God that the people of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice believe in. Their God never said, "I gave you two arms so you could get drug dealers' shots in them." This is demonic, and nobody criticizes it. Instead, they salute it and support it, and we pay for this. Am I angry? You bet I am. St. Thomas Aquinas said, if you're not angry when it's morally justifiable, you are immoral. And to use God's name in vain, as this person is doing, is insulting to anybody that believes in their God. Yep. The Biden administration keeps spending all this money. Quote, "Now, while I'm encouraged by the work that so many are doing, we need everybody to step up. We need to make protecting our loved ones an important part of the conversation we have around the Thanksgiving table. An important part of this conversation we have in the days and weeks ahead. Because here's what we know. If folks get their updated vaccines and they get treated, if they have a breakthrough infection, we can prevent essentially every COVID death in America." A total lie, according to Kaiser Foundation. And Cynthia Cox, who said, "We can no longer say that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated." This is terrible. What this person is selling is demonic, as they keep selling war as demonic. The comedian who played his role as one in a sitcom as the president of Ukraine that became the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, was quoted recently in the Financial Times as saying that the battle can only be won on the battlefield. It's the only way to bring about peace, on the battlefield. Nothing about peace. And now they have these terrible power outages. Some 80% of the people in Ukraine are without power, according to some of the reports. And the United States announced $4.5 billion for Ukraine. And following up on that, they announced another $425 million, $400 million weapons package. And according to antiwar.com, aid for Ukraine so far from the United States, $67 billion, and the White House is asking Congress to approve a new package of nearly $40 billion to keep bloodying the killing fields. Friday's Wall Street Journal. Arms makers increase output amid war. The world's biggest arm makers are scaling up production of rocket launchers, tanks, and ammunition as the industry shifts to meet what executives expect to be a sustained demand triggered by the war in Ukraine. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, and who is Defense Secretary in the United States? Lloyd Austin? Arms manufacturer? Or you mean he came from the board of directors of Raytheon? Second largest defense contractor in America? They're building up the war. They're leading us to World War III's begun. And now the Ukrainians are bombing again the nuclear power plant that the Russians are occupying in Ukraine. But the media is saying that the Russians are bombing it. Why would they bomb the place that they're occupying? Nuclear war is on the horizon. If we don't stop it, it's going to be hell on earth. This won't be a very Merry Christmas. Peace on earth, goodwill to all? Not a word. Not a word. No money coming from the big foundations we reached out to. None. We thank the people, believers in God above, that want peace on earth. And we thank you for supporting us and donating. But we need a lot more to make this happen. A lot more. I mentioned a person ran for governor. She lost in Georgia. $100 million to run for governor. $100 million. Do you imagine if they gave $100 million to Occupy Peace or the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice? We could have a global movement of peace. No. Won't do it. We want war. It's good for business. And by the way, you have the German chancellor over there, Olaf Scholz, saying that the Russians will not win. He said that Putin could, quote, no longer win on the battlefield. That much seems clear. I don't know who he's talking to, but it seems clear. They occupy over 20% of the country, and they're knocking out all the infrastructure because they did that after Crimea Bridge was blown up and the Nord Stream pipelines. And they said, okay, now we're going to escalate it. No talk about peace. And again, why did they do it? We're totally opposed to Russia's invasion. We totally understand why they did it. And the former chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, said so in a interview this past Thursday. She said, it did not come as a surprise. The Minsk agreements were eroded. That's right. They were eroded by Ukraine. The Minsk agreement came after the United States overthrew the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine in 2014, all detailed in the spring edition of the Trends Journal. All detailed. Article written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. The Minsk agreement said, okay, we have that separatist region. It's all Russian down there, the Donbass region. We have to cease fire until we can straighten this out. Ukraine went on to kill over 14,000 people in the Donbass region. It's exactly what Merkel said. It did not come as a surprise. The Minsk agreements were eroded. And quote, she wishes for more peaceful times. She wishes for more peaceful times. The current president, the chancellor of Germany, sending more weapons, saying the battlefield is going to keep fighting. Or fighting on the battlefield will continue, and that Russia can't win. So you can see where this is going. The trends are clear. If we don't stop this, it's only going to get much worse. Could you imagine the horror the people in Ukraine are living in? Could you imagine not having winters here in so many places around the world and not having any heat or electricity or water? And this is just the beginning. So please do what you can to support us. We must stop this, because if we don't, it's going to be hell on earth and possibly the end of life on earth if these maniacs in charge continue to wage war against we the people and rob us of our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whether through war, the Ukraine war, or the COVID war. Thank you. Amen and amen.